Welcome, I'm Richard Dolan. This is Intelligent Disclosure. This is our third episode, and it's July 19th, 2018. Here's Tracy.
Hi, everybody.
And here's me, and thanks for joining us again. So we're happy to be here. We just got back home. We were gone for a couple of days and drove for about 7 hours just to make sure that we would be back in time
We just got back.
for this to be with you. So hopefully we're good. I think we're set up. Just a couple of quick little admin things here I just want you to know. So it was noticed the last couple of times we did this that we had a regular kind of a steady camera shake. So I don't think that we'll have that problem anymore. We're slowly but surely learning how to do this a little bit better and better each time. So now we have a separate tripod. Moved the table a little bit, got a tripod behind. The room's still behind us. Hey, we're good to go. We got this. So I also want to thank our producers. I think we can call them that, Lori and Michael, who are way out on the other side of the country out in Arizona. They're making sure that this goes smoothly. Tracy, as always, does all kinds of behind-the-scenes work to make sure that we've got this and that it's good to go. So as I say, this is the third Intelligent Disclosure show episode that we're doing. And for those of you who are joining for the first time, I'll just give you a quick overview of what I would like to accomplish by this episode. And by the way, in case you're looking at Tracy, she's got her computer right here, and she's monitoring. What are you monitoring here anyway?
So, yeah, just so you know,
This is the microphone here.
I'm monitoring the chat as much as I can, but we have Lori and Michael helping us, and you'll see them jumping in and responding on Richard's behalf. So they will be pulling questions out, and I will be moderating those with the questions that we already have. So I'm back and forth. So sometimes I'm going to see what you're writing, and sometimes I'll be here and paying attention here. So
she'll pay attention here sometimes, pay attention there at other times. Yeah. So just in case you wonder, that's what's happening there. Okay. So, and the other thing that we're planning to do, we actually were chatting about this earlier today, is getting little lav mics hooked up to really do this professional and so forth. Don't have those yet. So what we have right now is this little microphone here, which you can't see most of the time. I have stacked up here. Think it's going to work pretty well, and there you go. So all right, so I say that the purpose of this program is, as I see it, really to give me an opportunity to follow up in a one-on-one format with you the important issues that I think we are both in the field that I primarily study, which is UFOs, as well as the other field that I primarily study, which is geopolitics. And I guess we could just broaden that to say anything that we feel, or that you may feel, is particular importance to our society. So I do my best on this one. I have a couple of new areas that people have asked about in the past that I have been asked, and I think it's just as good a time as now as any address. So if there's any other questions right now. Mm-hmm. So we're good.
Yeah.
In the last couple of weeks, there have been a number of people who have asked me about QAnon. So this is very interesting, and this is as good a time as any to kind of broach this one. So QAnon, and I've been asked about this for the longest time, and I've started casually following, and then really becoming acquainted with QAnon. My summary of it, for those of you who don't know, QAnon first posted a message to what is known as the 4chan site. So 4chan is a website where all kinds of people, many anonymous people, hence anon, will post thoughts and information on all kinds of subjects on basically everything under the sun. There's a lot of boards within 4chan. And in October of 2017, so not long ago, someone just known as QAnon, began posting information rather cryptically, I think we have to say, normally in a series of questions that very clearly made this individual seem like they were a fairly high-level insider within the Trump administration, and what you very clearly get from all of the messages of Q, from then until the present day, because Q continues to post and has posted a large number of posts, you get the very clear narrative that the Trump administration is surrounded by Democrats and Republicans that are of the deep state. Now, for anyone who's been studying the presidency of Trump, this is actually not a new concept. This is something that I've been looking at all along, and I've really looked at this analysis from this point of view from a number of times. In other words, is Trump really being surrounded by deep state operatives who want to take him down, and is he? And if you look around in political debates, you'll find all kinds of arguments that will go in all different directions on this matter. So with the Q, that is absolutely Q's narrative, that Donald Trump is fighting the deep state, Democrats and Republicans. It's not just against the Democrats. Now, what I would simply say is that there's been arguments that Q is legit, and there's been arguments that Q is not a legitimate person. And I think one of the more common arguments against Q being a legitimate person is that he's what's called a LARP. And a LARP simply, as I had to learn, because I'm not an insider in the gaming community, but a LARP is someone who is I'm sorry, I shouldn't be looking at these comments here.
Yeah, you're not supposed
to. A LARP is someone who is a role player. So, and it's not an unusual thing.
Like
an
authoritative role player.
An authoritative role player who knows their character really, really well and can pull it off. So the idea is that this person who's Q is actually a LARP who's portraying the role of being a high-level Trump insider, but really isn't at all. So that's fair as far as it goes. The reason that I'm not persuaded by that, even though Q has made wrong predictions. Like, for example, Q predicted way back at the end of October that Hillary Clinton would be arrested and that John Podesta and others would be indicted. And this obviously hasn't happened. But the reason that I'm not really convinced that Q is a LARP is simply that when I look at the information that's presented, it's of a level of detail, and I would even say sophistication, that I would be astonished. If there are LARPs out there, then they're really super, super impressive. And maybe that's the case. Maybe it is the case. I don't see that at this current time. I don't see that at all. Now, the fact is that a number of the predictions have been wrong. And, well, I don't know why they've been wrong. Maybe Q's not perfect. Maybe Q makes mistakes. What I would say is that the general assessment of Trump versus the deep state has been, to be honest with you, something that I've been arguing and writing for a very long time. And this is not to portray Trump as Jesus 2.0. I certainly don't see that. And it's not to portray him as Hitler 2.0, because I don't see that either. What I do see, and I will say this again, I've said this many times about Trump, is that despite the personality issues, which are easy to pick apart, the petulancy and all of the childishness that you see in Trump on many, many, many occasions. That's an easy thing to look at. But that, in my opinion, has never been the primary reason why he's been vilified. And he has been vilified. Whether you like him or not, it's pretty easy to see. Man's been vilified. And the reason is very simple. As a candidate, he opposed the two pillars of America's establishment policy. Very simple. Pillar number one, neoconservative empire. And whatever he's done as president, as a candidate, the man opposed the Iraq War of 2003, opposed the destruction of Libya in 2011, opposed the escalation of war in Syria in over the last several years. The things that I personally agreed with, and I suspect many of you listening and watching also agreed with. And shockingly, really shockingly, he opposed these as a presidential candidate. And he said the other thing against neoconservative empire, probably the most unforgivable sin, which was, hey, let's try to be on friendly relations or better relations with, wait for it, Russia. Again, something that I have personally agreed with for a very long time and continue to agree with. So this put him at odds with the neocons, people like John McCain, with blood dripping from his eyes every time he thinks of war. That's John McCain. He gets excited and aroused. McCain didn't like that, and neither did the Democratic establishment, because they're essentially neocons as well, from Hillary Clinton right onward. So that's pillar number one. Pillar number two is neoliberal globalization. So I talked about neoconservative empire. There's neoliberal globalization. And the funny thing, it's in my mind anyway, about Trump as a candidate, is that, again, shockingly, because who would have thought this guy, but he took really the position, I think, that's almost identical with that of Ralph Nader from 20 years earlier. And I'm sure there's some of you who remember Ralph Nader. Nader did his critique from the left, but it was really the same critique, which is anti-globalization. The whole thing of America being roped into international trade policies that chip away at American sovereignty and middle class and all of this. I remember Nader in the late 90s talking very explicitly about trade treaties with China that allowed the Chinese to harvest American Northwest woodlands, forests, and even using Chinese labor to do it. And that was a problem. It is a problem, according to many people who lose their jobs. So anyway, that's Trump. Who would have thought this guy would take on globalization from the right instead of from the left? But there you go. And I think the attack on those two pillars really made him the actual enemy. Not his sexism or any other moral failings that he has. Again, I would argue or suggest that's what makes it easy. But when you're talking about the established Washington, Wall Street nexus, I think this is a problem from their point of view. So he's always been the enemy, and he's always been, taken down in this way. And, the unforgivable sin about wanting to be friendly with Russia. Look, I've shocked when I have some people who are angry with me over the fact that wanting to be friendly with Russia is now considered right wing, according to some people. I'm like, have we all Americans lost their minds? Seriously. Has half of it or more of this country lost their mind over Russia? Rigging elections? I'll say it again. That's our job. That's what America does. America rigs elections, and no one does it better. The Russians, are you kidding me? I'm waiting for the evidence, and I will continue to laugh at this because it is a laughable assertion. Evidence, when you or anyone else shows me evidence that Russia has tampered with the U.S. elections in 2016, then I will gladly change my opinion on this matter, and I will say so publicly. I have no problem doing that. No shame in being wrong, by the way, because when you're wrong, that means you can improve yourself by moving toward the truth, and that's always a good thing. But the problem is with Russia, people need to provide evidence, and there has been none, like really none. Authoritative statements, vague authoritative statements coming from the establishment do not count as evidence. Please don't fall into the trap of following authority from your society simply because they say such and such a thing is true. It's not true. So it's not that Russia is some innocent player in the world age, obviously. Russia spies on America. America spies on Russia. We all know this. What just makes me laugh is that Americans are shocked that the Russians might dare to do something like interfere with the American elections. Well, again, you need to show evidence. And if it's by weaponizing WikiLeaks, which is the main thing that one hears, well, the real question is, did WikiLeaks release false information about the Democratic National Committee? And to my knowledge, nothing false has been released. WikiLeaks has a decade-plus track record of impeccable accuracy in what they release. If it was Russia that released the shenanigans that the Democratic National Committee did to destroy the candidacy of Bernie Sanders, then maybe you should thank Russia, because you know that America's most popular candidate, and that's not Trump and that's not Hillary, that's Bernie Sanders, was undermined by the Democratic National Committee. But again, there's no evidence that Russia did this. So until you show evidence, until anyone shows evidence, we're looking at hearsay upon hearsay. So that's my take on QAnon and on Trump, and then the whole Trump-Putin summit. Let me just talk about this before we move into UFOs, which I want to do. The Trump-Putin summit, I will just say this. I think it was a very good and overdue thing Should have been done over a year ago. It was better late than never. Every single American president who's ever taken office has met with the leader of Russia or the Soviet Union. It's what we do. It's what is supposed to be done. They have the other nuclear arsenal that can destroy the world. It's a good thing to be on friendly or less adversarial relations to the extent possible. Again, I don't understand how this is a bad thing. In my lifetime, this is the first time ever that the left has gone insane over Russia. That's the job of the right. Remember, the right wing goes crazy over Russia, and they still do. But now you have the left that's gone insane over Russia. Reality check here, guys. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And people really need to look long and hard about this. It's, what was the nation that destroyed Iraq in 2003 based on the lies of weapons of mass destruction? Not Russia, that was America. What was the nation that then continued to organize and fund and train Sunni and Shiite jihadists out of Baghdad in 04, 05, 06 and onward to destabilize Iraq and then Syria? That was not Russia, that was the United States. By the way, under the U.S. ambassador to Baghdad named John Negroponte. Look him up. Who was a nation that destroyed Libya in 2011, the most unconscionable crime, perhaps, of the 21st century? That was not Russia. That was the United States. Someone's saying no sound. Is our sound coming through?
Can you guys hear?
All right. Well, anyway.
It says video's paused.
Well, all right. Who is the nation that destroyed or tried to destroy the nation of Syria by arming and funding Islamic jihadists in that nation in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016? That was not Russia. That was a nation called the United States of America. And I could go on and on about this. So there's just a lot to be said about this. And I would have thought that my friends on the left would have remembered a thing or two, that if they'd ever read a word or two by Noam Chomsky, they would realize not to trust the mainstream, lamestream, establishment, corporate, criminal media. Because Chomsky taught me that back in the 1980s. And I thought he taught a lot more people. They seem to have forgotten this. Okay. Why am I talking about this? I'm moving on to UFOs, but this is important because we're living in a world where the power structure, which controls discourse on UFOs, and it still does, by the way, controls discourse on every other thing that's of importance. So because I do study geopolitics and the history of false flags, I thought it'd be a good idea to get into this whole thing with Q and the Trump and Putin and so forth. So having said that, let's move on. And someone writes, "You're the news, Richard." All right, well, thanks for that. Appreciate it.
So we're going to UFOs?
We're moving on to UFOs.
Okay,
I thought I'd talk about...
Let me thank some people first.
Oh, yeah, please.
Before we do that. Because I know we're all excited to go into UFOs. But Christine Siebel, thank you, Minnesota folk. I know you guys were here last week. And just want to thank you so much. Hornby 1, you were here last week. Diffuse 56, I think you were here one of the last 2 weeks. Lethal Weapon and Bill Clayman. And they have a couple questions. And I will keep them on the list and we'll get to them.
We will, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so one is about dreams and one is about Emery Smith. So hold tight. Hang on.
Okay. Well, let me talk about Gaia, the whole Gaia controversy for right now. And let me just say, to talk about these types of things is, I wish that I didn't have to make statements about this because I consider it really off the main subject, which is that of the UFO phenomenon, which is why I like to think we're often here. But because I did a show with Gaia about a year ago, and because there's been a very huge stirring up of controversy concerned with Gaia, primarily because of the resignation of David Wilcock from Gaia, so people have asked me what I think about this. More to the point, one individual on a YouTube video took the liberty of talking about what they thought was my relationship to Gaia. In ways that I certainly didn't volunteer this information or didn't give overt permission, but people say what they say. So let me just say this. A year ago, I did a show on Gaia TV on the history of false flags. And as you probably know, false flags are one of my main current research interests right now. And if you don't know what a false flag is, it's very straightforward. A false flag is an action done by often a government or an intelligence group or any other organization, could be even done by a person, that something horrible, often traumatic, some terrible thing that is then blamed on another party, and typically with the view to justify some kind of action that would not really otherwise easily be justified. So that's a false flag, and in fact, our world is filled with many false flags, quite a number of which are totally confirmable and provable, others which are suspected and seem likely. And so my research on false flags has simply been to collect all that I think are relevant and to provide what I think is the best case for arguing that such and such an event was a false flag. That's basically what I did. And I did this for Gaia. So I wrote out an extended series for Gaia. And so I'll just say right now, it is true that the original incarnation of what I prepared for Gaia was, I guess we'll say, rejected. That's true. And then we came back to the drawing board and I prepared something, a second version, often with a lot of the same material. It's not like I completely came up with different stuff, which then went and that aired. And I will just say the feedback that I've received on that series has been uniformly positive. So I'm very pleased about that. So here's the thing. Gaia is a media organization primarily. And I've had a lot of experience dealing with other media organizations. Gaia is not the first one. And Gaia, like all of them, has their own idea on what they want to air on their network. And what I have to say is that's their right. If they don't like what I prepared for the first go-round, because they thought it was a little too energetic, which was the main critique that I was told of my presentation. I got into it a little too much. Then they're right to do so. If you've followed me at all over the years, you know that can happen.
That can happen.
I got a little worked up, and so for the second one, the intention was definitely not to tone down the content, but to tone myself down. And actually, I was pretty happy with how the second version came out.
It
did come down.
Yeah, it was actually a nice change. Not that it wasn't great before, but it was a nice change.
Tracy's opinion. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, now, were there substantive arguments? The answer is yes, of course there were. I've had substantive arguments with producers since I've ever done my first show of any sort. So that's always the case. But I personally am not faulting Gaia for that. And for someone else to fault Gaia and to insist that they are therefore Luciferian, I just think, look, this is a joke. I'm just going to have to say this. I spent a lot of time there. I know the people who are involved in production there. These are not Luciferian people. And the argument made that they are is, I think, laughably bad. I mean, laughably bad. And also, what just strikes me as odd, shouldn't it strike you as odd, that here we are in the 21st century. We've gone through, let's see, 3+ centuries now of hopefully a scientific and secular attitude wearing away at medieval superstitions. I mean, seriously. It was only a little over 3 centuries ago that the city of Salem, Massachusetts, burned people as witches and killed them as witches. Are we coming back to that? It's not that there aren't evil, dark people in this world. And, if you look at Bohemian Grove or the allegations of Satanism there, it's not that there isn't that type of a thing. I'm not saying that's not the case. But when we start throwing around accusations based on zero evidence, and I mean zero evidence, guys, all right, that's a dangerous road to go down. All right. So, again, I just think that the whole Gaia controversy is another case of drama that is being drummed up. And here's the thing. You ever have a friend in your life who every time you talk to them, there's some kind of new drama that comes up in their life? And, for a while, you're kind of interested in hearing what's Mary got to say this time, right? And you call up and like, oh, Mary's got this other drama that's in her life. Well, everyone's got a Mary or a Joe or whoever in their life who's like this. Okay? Well, there are people in this field of ours, and I'm not going to give any names out, but they're just like that. There's drama that follows them wherever they go. And you should really ask yourself, what does that mean? That drama follows someone wherever they go. I don't think it's a good thing. So that's what I'll just say. So again, with Gaia, I really wanted to say what I did because before this goes any further, all right, I'm not out. I don't have an agenda against them. I don't really have any plans for any further shows with them. If they want me to do a show, I would be willing to talk with them like any other network about what I want to conceive of and do. But I've got nothing in the works and no plans to think it's going to happen. So I don't really have any skin in the game anymore. It doesn't really matter to me. Anyway, I just think it's an unfortunate, distracting drama, again, that has littered our field. And sorry that I'm adding to it now, but I really felt that I needed to just because I got dragged into it, and there you go. Okay, how was that? How are we doing for time here?
That's sort of like dealing with all the political stuff. Let's get into UFOs.
Let's do it.
Okay. So, first, this question is from Cosmic. What do you know about the use of technology for UFO abduction detection, like the differential time meter or the Bigelow device, AMP? And why is there not a lot more of this kind of research conducted, especially given the relatively small amount of money these devices would require to design, manufacture, and deploy?
Hey, Cosmic, thanks. And by the way, Cosmic, I want to talk to you in the near future. Tracy and I received your last message, and it was quite intriguing. So on that another time. So I think the question's a good one in general. Now, I wish that I could give a little more specific information on the technology of these two devices specifically that you mentioned. And I just have to state that I'm not conversant specifically with the technology, at least in a way that would make me sound like I know what I'm talking about. So I want to avoid that. What I can say, though, is that there are technologies available to us that would assist us in all kinds of what we could say UFO detection. And increasingly, the fact that we've got smartphones, most of us now, many of us, with the possibility of various apps that we can all have that would enable not simply abduction detection, that might be trickier, it might not, but UFO detection in real time. Seems to me this should be entirely possible. We're moving into an era of widespread night vision, wider spread, I should say, night vision, capabilities of IR or infrared technology that I can see will only become more and more available to a widespread group of people. And IR detection could be really useful for detecting anomalous craft. And then other types of technologies that I'm sure exist and I don't even know about, ways to detect disturbances in electromagnetically, for example. My goodness, this type of idea has existed since the 1950s at the very least. A Canadian scientist named Wilbur Smith developed this known as Project Magnet back in the 50s to detect UFOs and appears, by the way, to have detected a UFO on at least one occasion using this system. So there's things that we can do. And what's great about the era we live in now, seems to me, is that because we can be connected with our smartphone technology through apps, I don't see why we can't be interconnected through an app that would allow a lot of people to become aware of things as they happen in real time. So to answer your question, generally, Cosmic, I would say, yes, in theory, this makes sense to me. And I think what we probably need are technically savvy, smart people to come up with some ideas to implement these. Again, it seems to me totally feasible that we should be able to do it. So there you go. Any other questions we have here?
Oh, there's lots of questions. I don't know whether I should ask you this one or not, but it was, I just want to say thank you to Steve Murillo. Murillo, sorry. Steve, we know Steve. I missed you in there. Just want to say thank you so much. We see you in there interacting. We have another friend, Skywatcher's in there interacting as well. Producer for KGRA. So we want to say hi to you guys. But thank you, Steve.
And these are both friends. They're both friends of ours. Steve has been a long time friend of mine and of you now. You know, and Steve, you're a great guy. It's great to have you out there. And you too, Bill.
So we have a couple questions. So thank you again to everybody. Very cool questions going on in there. Do you have any thoughts on Emery Smith? Let's just throw it out there because people have asked every single week, and I kind of kept it to the side but I'm just going to throw it out. You can decline it or not.
No, I'll say a little bit. It's not my interest to go into an open dispute with anyone in this field, and the main reason is not that I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to conserve my energy and not waste my time. Even going back to the 90s, I realized you start getting into what were called flame wars back then, and that's a total waste of time, and it doesn't help anybody. So having said that, look, I don't think it's any secret that I'm generally speaking skeptical of most of these so-called alleged whistleblowers, and I should be using air quotes for whistleblower. And the reason I say this is that you're not a whistleblower if I don't really know who you are, and if I can't find out who you are. So claims are one thing, and if depending on how claims come out, can make a difference in our assessment of you if you're a whistleblower. So, for example, back in the 1970s and early 80s, there was a UFO researcher named Leonard Stringfield who wrote a book back in the 70s on crash retrievals, little bit on them, and had a lot of people come to him quietly, anonymously, privately. Now, people knew who Stringfield was, and he was a very responsible researcher who didn't really go off into the wild blue, and he sought evidence. And Stringfield collected many, many accounts of quiet, anonymous whistleblowers who gave him information about crash retrievals and alien autopsies and other things. Now, to me, those are credible by the way that Stringfield acquired these stories, and there's a whole backstory to that, and I'll spare you for now, but I credit Stringfield. Other whistleblowers who come out essentially in the form of celebrities, which is really what a lot of these individuals have come out. I think we need to be very, very cautious before accepting any of their claims. This is just normal common sense. That means checking their background, checking their claims. It has been told to me that Mr. Smith has claimed that he has 2 PhDs. So I want to know, really, if you really have 2 PhDs, then I would like to know, where did you get them and what were they in? And what was your dissertation or your research that enabled you to get a PhD? And, just putting that question out there among others. The claim that he's made hundreds of, take your pick, incisions or autopsies, and I don't know which, because I think I've heard both. I mean, I sat on a stage with him a couple of months ago in California, and I just have to say this, his demeanor and behavior, I don't consider to be a credit to this field, and I did not consider to be professional. So I'm just going to say that for now. This field has had new whistleblowers being promoted on a fairly regular basis. And again, it doesn't mean that all whistleblowers are fake. Clearly, I'm not saying that. I think that some whistleblowers very well may be telling the truth. But all whistleblowers, for them to constitute being a whistleblower, we've got to be able to find out who they are, and even if we can't check every one of their facts, because admittedly, maybe that's difficult. You're dealing with a secret space program or allegations. Okay, I get it. It's not always easy to check something like that, but we should at least be able to check you out. And if you come up short, we can just toss you aside. So until you can provide me with something to work with, it wouldn't be responsible for me to take such a person seriously. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And now I'm sure, by the way, that, because I didn't plan this question, but I can't run away from them either. So
it's been asked a lot.
It's been asked a lot, and
Yeah.
so let me just put that out there now. I'm sure there'll be repercussions from this. Like, people will say, oh, shit, Dolan said this, and it's a throwdown. So I don't want it to be that way, because I'm not interested in pursuing that. Anyway.
So I'm just going to throw out a couple of quick ones. Someone asked about your thoughts on Elizondo's interview on Coast to Coast, which I know we didn't see. So
golly.
Unless you've heard anything that I don't know about,
No, and I really should have. It's my negligence. That's absolutely would have been my responsibility to have heard that. And I was aware that it happened, and I need to listen carefully. I will just say this, though, from what I know about Louise Elizondo. I've never spoken to him. I have listened to a couple of his interviews, and some of them are good interviews. I'm hoping that on Coast he answered a lot of the questions that people have been asking. So for example, what, for God's sake, is the actual name of ATIP? It's a really simple question, right? I don't know if he answered this. So when the program came out, when it was announced in December of last year, we all know it was Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Okay, fine. Listen to researchers like my friend John Greenwald, who has done multiple FOIA requests on ATIP, and it was told explicitly by the Pentagon connection that he had that it's Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. Well, that's a significant difference. So what is it? And you may think that's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. And when you're filing FOIA requests to get information on this, it matters. So I would like to know from Louise Elizondo, like, what's the actual name of the program and why? Why do Pentagon spokespersons call it Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program? Simple question. Another question I would like to ask him simply is, we know about the 2004 Tic Tac UFO case. Yeah, it's a great case. It's an important case, right? But that actually took place, we're told, 3 years before the ATIP program even began in 2007. So what were the ATIP cases of significance from 2007 to 2012, the years we absolutely know for a fact that the program ran? And furthermore, because I haven't heard any. Furthermore, I would like to know about the disposition of this program after 2012. All right, it's been stated very clearly by at least some of the New York Times writers of that story, Leslie Kane, Ralph Blumenthal, both went on the record and stated that they pretty much knew that the ATIP program continued after 2012. Well, okay, so Louise Elizondo, please let's get into that. There's a lot of questions here that we really would like to answer. So now there's been, I've heard critiques of Louise Elizondo as well, and I don't want to get into something that I don't know firsthand. I will say that the few interviews that he's done on national television, I thought he did a decent job, did a good job. And I really need to hear him on Coast, so I apologize. I've not, I should have been caught up on that one. It's hard for me to do Coast. I mean, you'd think I would catch all the shows on Coast to Coast, and in fact, I catch very few of them. Isn't that crazy? But definitely, I think that's one I'll be finding in the near future. So.
Okay. Someone asked if you could talk about the 2009 UFO turkey footage.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned that you thought it was real. So could you comment on that?
By the Sea of Marmara. Absolutely.
And this was, I believe this was in last week's chat as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, good. I wrote about this in my last large book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. And I credit that case, I think, pretty strongly. So there's been, let me just describe first. So you can even find on YouTube, type in 2008, 2009 Turkey UFO, and you'll find a great deal of video that was shot of an object in the sky over the Sea of Marmara. And you can look it up on Google Earth or any map right off the Turkish coast. Of an object that once you zoom in on it, it's like a crescent-shaped object. And it's rather extraordinary to look at. And this went on for quite some time. Now, I remember when the late Roger Lear, who was a friend of mine and a colleague of mine, and I spoke to Roger about this. Roger went to Turkey to look through the telescope, and he saw this, and he spoke about it. Now, there's been critiques of this video. And probably the most involved critique that I'm aware of claim that this was, I'm trying to remember the details, but like a fishing boat on the water, and that it was actually much lower in the sky than people claim, and that it was all an optical illusion. So I'll simply say that my own analysis of that analysis is that it comes up really, really short and is not convincing at all. Not at all. So until someone can really debunk this otherwise, I think the Turkish UFO videos are, I consider them legit. And even crazier, but nonetheless, there's some of that video where it was zoomed in and you see what looked like figures through a window. And in fact, that made the cover of UFO magazine a number of years ago when it was published by Bill Burns. And the argument was that they look like non-humans. So you go look for those images and decide for yourself. But it's interesting. And again, I credit it until it's debunked in a definitive way that hasn't yet happened in my view. Next.
Okay. For our Canadians, someone asked if you're familiar, and I don't know about this, with the Canadian MUFON case with the 3 American hunters who saw 3 incredible craft.
Year? Do we have a year on this one?
No, but it looks like a case number 72482.
Not very helpful.
I'm not
Sorry.
sure. If you're still there, whoever wrote that, is that the one that we just got the coin made for? The commemorative? I don't think it is it? Was that Falcon?
No, that was no. That was the Stephen Michalak case
Okay.
of 1967. That's a good case, by the way. But I don't think that's what this gentleman or person is speaking about. So
Okay.
I don't know how to comment on that.
Okay, but maybe you could tell them about Ryan Stacy's information that's coming up.
Oh yeah. In fact, while I'm at it, let me just take a minute. Last week on Intelligent Disclosure, I talked about my goal to begin interviews with UFO researchers from around the world. And I think really the best venue for me to do that is the Richard Dolan show that I have on KGRA, which also appears on this YouTube channel. So my goal is to interview people from around the world and really to start a broader discussion of sharing of UFO information from different countries. So I just interviewed a couple of Canadian researchers just in the last week. We did pre-records. One aired last week. That was with a Canadian researcher named Johnny Enoch, who's brilliant, actually, and go check that out. We've just loaded it on this channel, on this YouTube channel, and he's a very excellent researcher. That was my son just coming home, so what can you do? Thank you, Mike. Haven't talked to him in a little while. So maybe I'll drag him on, get him on camera at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know if he would want that, but
I don't know about that.
So that's Johnny Enoch. I also interviewed a MUFON Canadian researcher named Ryan Stacy. Really liked my interview with Ryan. And he discussed a couple of very interesting cases, particularly toward the latter part of that interview, which were just phenomenal, fascinating, fairly recent Canadian cases. But I don't want to jump that one. That interview is going to be coming out on this YouTube channel in a week or two at the latest. So just suffice to say, there's some very interesting things going on north of the U.S. border with Canada, that's for sure. But the one that the person wrote about here, I don't know. I don't know what this case is.
Okay. I got to thank you again, Lethal Weapon. We've got something here from you. This I'm just going to show you right here.
When is my false flag book being released? Have I heard of DARPA's Targeted Neuroplasticity Training Program? Holy, TNT is the acronym for that one. Second question, no, haven't heard of it. Guess I need to do some research on that. My false flag book. So yeah, good, fair question, because I've been talking about this for a long time. Every time I go to talk with Jimmy Church, one of his first questions is, Dolan, when are you going to get that done? And I'm going to have to tell him to just lay off because I'm working on it. The false flag book, I think we're in the middle of 2018 now. I can say this, by the end of this year, I'm pretty confident in saying I'll have more than 300 pages of it done. I think so. And by that time, I'll be heading toward the home stretch because my goal is for this book to be between 300 and 400 pages. So early 2019, probably my best bet. I'm working on it. And then once that's done, I know I've been saying this forever, and people have a right to treat it with a little skepticism, but I want to jump into it and wrap up Volume 3 of UFOs in the National Security State as soon as the false flag book is done. I'm just going to jump in. I see one question: opinions of Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff. Okay. Can I just jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I know Hal Puthoff personally. I don't know Eric Davis personally. And in case you want to know who these people are, they're both associated with To the Stars Academy. But I think more to the point, they're both scientists, physicists, who've done a great deal of work for the defense establishment over the years. Puthoff is really quite famous, and Hal Puthoff is, along with Russell Targ, one of the two men who really developed the protocols for the famous remote viewing program, contracted initially by the CIA and then by the U.S. military. I've had a number of conversations with Hal Puthoff over the years. I consider him someone of integrity, my opinion. Someone who is, in my view, doing his best to navigate his way through this world of UFOs, which he's definitely interested in. And I don't know if he has all the answers. I doubt it. And look, I've gone on the assumption over the years that everyone in this field has got their own motivations for doing whatever it is they do. And those motivations aren't always my motivations, but that doesn't invalidate them. But my feeling is that I'm speaking here of Hal Puthoff because I know him. I feel and have sensed, and all of his actions have sort of supported my theory that he's doing his very best to work through this field with as much latitude as he can and do as much good as he can. So that's my take on Hal Puthoff. And I suspect he knows a heck of a lot about this subject that has probably been confirmed to him, that have not been explicitly confirmed to me, because I'm not in the club and circles that he is in, at least in many ways. So I'll say that. Yes.
Okay, I just want Bill Clayman to know that I haven't forgotten about you. I am holding your question because it's a really interesting question about dreams. So I'm just hanging on to it for a bit. Just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
So
is it actually, wow, how long have we been doing this? 45 minutes?
Oh gosh. Okay, so let's.
This always happens.
I know, it goes so fast. Okay. There's a couple of interesting questions here. How would you rate Major Donald E. Kehoe as a genuine whistleblower? How do you feel about that?
Well, look, there's a reason my initial publishing company was called Kehoe Publishing. It was a bit of an homage to Kehoe. Without Donald E. Kehoe, there would have been no Edward Ruppelt, in my opinion. If you know your UFO history, you know what I'm talking about. Before Ruppelt wrote his very first book, his one great book on UFOs called Report on Unidentified Flying Objects in 1956, Kehoe had written 3 books on the UFO subject. All right, and 3 good books on the UFO subject. Yes, I think Kehoe, I think more than a whistleblower, we can call him a good journalist who used his connections within the Navy and the Marines to open this subject up in ways that were really valuable for researchers then and now. Kehoe's books, the amazing thing is that they're still worth reading after all these years. The thing that worked against Kehoe as a journalist, in my view, is his style of writing. He had this kind of snappy journalistic writing, like he was writing some like a mystery novel. I said to him, "Do you really think it was a UFO?" He sat down, smoked a cigarette, looked out the window, and gave me his answer. That's the kind of thing you get with Kehoe. And so it's not academically written, it's not scientifically written. So it's easy for people looking back to be dismissive of him. But I have to say, Donald Kehoe was the first man to write about the Robertson panel of 1953. He didn't have the name, but he had the panel and he knew about it. He learned about it immediately and wrote about it immediately. It was Kehoe who was able to get the U.S. military, the Pentagon, to declassify over 50 military encounters with UFOs back in 1952. And he was able to do it. After he wrote about it in his book, Flying Saucers from Outer Space from 1953, the word was there was a top-level general who screamed out, "How the hell did Kehoe get those reports?" But they were properly declassified for him through his connections. Donald Kehoe was the first and best, most important UFO researcher of the first few decades of this phenomenon. And, look, he was a classic patriot of his era. He believed in the American system of government, and he organized the group NICAP, which was, before there was disclosure, there was Kehoe, there was NICAP, and their mission for years was to get UFOs discussed publicly in Congress. And they've never really succeeded the way they wanted to, but you can't blame Kehoe for that. I think he worked in his best capacity and did not do a bad job at all. So That's Kehoe, and I'm an admirer. I regret he died a few years before I got into the subject. He died back in 1988, I believe, and a little bit before I got involved.
Okay, I just have to say this right now. There are so many good questions in there. There's no way we're going to be able to get to them all, but oh, there are so many good
Well, let's see if
questions.
we can do a couple of quick, bang them out, like 1 minute at a time.
Okay. Well, I want to
A
say,
couple of
I
quick
want to
ones.
give you Bill's and Mike's. Thank you so much, Mike, for your generous super chat. So it's right up in front of us right now. Love you, Richard. I've been trying my hardest to blow up Joe Rogan's videos with comments, but have you tried to make any
Thanks.
headway to get on the show? I won't rest until you're on the show for a 3-hour interview.
Yeah, thanks. I haven't really reached out like at all. Okay, and that's my fault. So I always admired Rogan. I remember when he did stand-up comedy. I thought he was good then, and I think as a host of his show, he does a very very good job. Um, and I will say that I think it would be a benefit for me to get on that show, and not for my sake, but I think that we would be able to have a very good and informed discussion on the UFO subject. So um, maybe I don't even have his email. I don't even know how, honestly, to get in touch with Joe Rogan. This is the truth. It's embarrassing. So if someone wants to throw me a bone, help me out, they can email me or tell Tracy or whoever. Best
Throw it
way
in
for
the
me to
chat.
reach Rogan. And here's what I'll do. I'll send him a note. How about that? We'll try to make this happen.
Okay. Interesting comment about Mockingbird with Joe. Okay.
Mockingbird.
Yeah.
Always interested to talk about that. Quickly, though.
Think they were just saying that they thought Joe was a part of it. My belief is that Joe is a part of Mockingbird, the continuation of Mockingbird, essentially.
I have no idea.
Don't know.
I could not say. Look, one thing that happens in this world, when I was chatting a number of times about and with my friend and colleague, Catherine Austin Fitz. A lot of you know who Catherine is. Catherine has talked explicitly about what she calls a control file. So a control file in politics is essentially a file that one of the 3-letter agencies has on you when you get to a certain place in the political system, basically the blackmail file. So they know everything you've ever done, and they control you. So I think this is a widespread thing. And this goes not just in politics, but I assume within media, and I assume everywhere. And you really never know. The only thing you can judge a person on is not your suspicion of them. Because that's not fair. You can't prove that. The only thing you can judge someone on is what they do and what they say. That's it. So you got to look at what they say. And if they are genuinely moving the ball forward, if they're genuinely asking good questions, that's enough for a day's work. And that's the only way that I can really judge anybody, is not on what I suspect, because that's a quick way to go crazy into the world of paranoia. You have to judge people on what they do and what they say.
Okay. I want to just divert from UFOs for a second for Bill Clayman's question.
Got our microphone here.
He's wondering if we think some dreams are a form of actual remote viewing.
Well, you should chime in on this.
I will. He's wondering what we both think about it.
I'll give my quick question. I'm going to do this quickly so Tracy can jump in more. I don't feel qualified to give a true answer, but I will say I had a conversation a number of years ago with a very well-qualified neurologist about the nature of consciousness itself. And he was very quietly giving his minority opinion among neurologists in his field, because most of these guys are hardcore materialists. Hardcore. Not only do they not believe in consciousness as an independent thing, but they don't believe in free will. It's all chemical, neurological, electrical connections to these people. And I actually consider them frightening individuals in many ways. So this neurologist was telling me that no, there's a non-local element to consciousness. And he was a PhD in his field and well qualified, I thought, to say what he did. Mm-hmm. I know there's other neurologists who feel the same way. So if that's the case, if there's an important non-local element to our consciousness, that is non-local, meaning not all dependent on your brain, that you're tapping into a sea that's out there, then of course the possibility would be not just your dreams, but your waking thoughts. Why limit it to dreams? So I guess all I would say, and then you're taking the floor here, is that and it's possible. I don't know if it's true or not, but certainly I would say it could be possible. What do you think?
I definitely think there's a non-local element, and it's really hard to say. We're really speculating here, of course, but judging just from personal experience, I definitely think there's something else going on. So I do think that that is certainly a possibility. I never thought of that question. I never thought that we could be remote viewing, but it kind of makes sense. Remote viewing is based on an intention and a target. And so if our minds are focusing on something, if we're doing a research project or we're just deeply focused, especially if it's a place and something going on somewhere else, I don't see really the difference of why that couldn't happen during our sleep when it can happen during the day when we have that focused intent. In an actual remote view, we are going beyond space and time and we are going to another location and information is being revealed to us. So it's just my random thought that I definitely think it's possible. I never would have thought of it that way. But
Well, you of all people, I mean, not only do you do excellent remote viewing, but Tracy has some of the most, I mean, seriously
yeah.
unusual dreams of anyone that I've ever talked to in my life. Like, really, you do.
I'm sure there's lots of people out there who do too, have really crazy stuff going on at night in their dreams.
We should like not only do an episode on remote viewing like we
Yeah.
talked about last week, but we could really do a good episode on
Dreams.
your dreams specifically. Tracy keeps a dream journal, and
I have to.
it's
There's
almost
so much
like
going on.
it's like a TV show, like of future tech, because things come in her dreams that are absolutely like plot narrative driven. I don't know how that's possible,
I
but
don't
you
know
do
either.
it, and that deal
Considering
with
we don't watch TV, really.
they deal with future tech issues. Like you would like to dream up some of these things that you come out of your dreams. So
Yeah, and I know people can relate to this from their own stuff, but oftentimes, like you said, there's technology. There are things that I know I have never seen before in any movie, in any show, in reality. They are completely new, and this happens often. So I have to ask, where is this coming from? And I can only speculate, of course, that I'm tapping into something non-local. So it's a fascinating question. I'm going to think about some more. It's my absolute favorite area is dreams, lucid dreams, near death, out of body, all of these psi things, because I think they're all related. There's access to something else, and it might just boil down to something we haven't really thought of, like are our thoughts targeted at certain times when we go to sleep, even subconsciously. So thanks for the amazing question. I will give that
Great.
much more thought. So that was great.
yeah, thank you, and I'm glad you were able to provide a perspective on that. So we're running later and later. It's been close to an hour. Last time we went a little over an hour. I don't
Let me
see why
just
we.
check on things here
Tracy's
with
got the questions.
Lori and Michael, who again we want to thank so much for helping us
yeah.
out and monitoring the chat for us, because my gosh, it goes so fast. It's so hard to keep track of. So we are so grateful to them for everything they're doing. Okay. So we have a thumbs up. We're going to keep going for a little bit longer. Let me see. Again, you guys have. So I'm going to ask Richard this because, again, your global program that you're thinking of.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. What do I think of Russia and China's UFO programs? Yeah, this is always relevant. It's always interesting. So rather than me talking about well, I can talk a little bit about the programs that existed in the days of the Soviet Union, only because there has been a little bit written about them. There's a program in the Soviet era known as Setka-On program and Setka-Mo program. And the Setka was simply a Russian acronym having to do with this subject. I don't speak Russian. One was, it was almost analogous to like America's Project Blue Book and then the classified military program of UFOs. And in the case of the Russian Soviet program in the 70s and 80s, similarly, they had, through the Russian Academy of Sciences, the public version of a program that looked at least somewhat at UFOs, and there was a military classified component of that. In China's case, I'll come up to modern Russia in just a moment. In China's case, we have some glimmers of a Chinese UFO program as well, and through a couple of sources. So one was through a Chinese researcher who's around today. His name is Dr. Sun Li, I believe. Had the opportunity to meet him on one occasion about 5 years ago. He did an interview on Open Minds, actually, a couple of years ago. You should check it out, where he talks a little bit about what he has learned of the Chinese UFO research program. Long story short, he argued that, yes, China is interested in studying UFOs. They've had a couple of interesting military encounters. He didn't really have a lot of information that I found satisfying, to be honest with you, but I think it was very clear from his perspective and the people in the Chinese military he spoke to that there is a Chinese military UFO program. There's a story going back to the 1990s. This is a different era for China, frankly, but Dr. C.B. Scott Jones, who was a former Navy fighter pilot and an aide to the late Rhode Island Senator Claiborne Pell, a man very interested in UFOs. So Scott Jones did a mission to China on behalf of Senator Pell to learn about Chinese UFO research. Oh yeah, that happened in the 90s. And according to Jones, he's still alive. He's very advanced, getting on in years. I like Scott Jones and met him a couple of times. He spoke to the Chinese researchers, deeply impressed by their program, and said, why are you guys waiting? Why are you not jumping out and announcing the reality of this program? You've got lots of PhDs, you have lots of research, you have lots of sophisticated analysis. And supposedly the answer was, we're waiting for America to do something. When America goes first, we'll be a close second, was the answer. That's China. That's 25 years ago. Now, China's gone through a whole development since then. And I don't know where China's UFO program is. China's got a lot of UFO researchers. In fact, in the coming weeks and months, I intend to interview 2 of them on the Richard Dolan show. So stick around for that. And I think that'll be an eye-opener. Relating to Russia. Russia's had UFO crash retrievals. Russia's had every bit as large number of military UFO encounters as the United States has. Every bit. And some of incredible drama. All right. So there's no question. And, during particularly the breakup period of the Soviet Union, there were some statements that came out into the open about Russia's military encounters that were shockingly candid. So they've had their encounters. They've had their retrievals. My assumption is that their program to study and replicate technology is probably every bit as advanced as what we have in the United States. But I don't have specific information, and I would love to be able to dig into that one, but that's the best I can say for now. I guess I'll summarize by hypothesizing that you've got competing UFO technology programs around the world. To some extent, they're probably nationally based, US, Russia, China, but then you've got other nations like Britain, like other US allies that undoubtedly have retrieved some information on this. So you've got US and allies probably sharing a lot of information on this. You got Russia and China as wild cards in this, perhaps sharing their own information. Those 2 nations have drawn very closely together in the last decade.
Okay, I'm just going to go for a quick question here. It says, Tracy, do you sometimes wonder if something happened or you dreamed it? This happens to me. And I just want to bring it up because so many people have asked. For me, what I've done over the years is I've made a scale for myself. So one, I'll categorize all my dreams. One might be sort of a mishmash of the day, and I'll kind of write those off. The next one might be I'll have 1 or 2 that seem a little more symbolic. Category 5 would be you can't convince me that was a dream. So to answer your question, yes. And I think a lot of people who originally went to John Mack, a lot of people who felt they were having abductions, but they weren't sure because they were happening in dreams. But this is a common thing that they would say, you can't convince me this was a dream. There's something, if they didn't wake up with actual marks, there is this really different feeling to it. So for me, I never discount that. And I always keep a record of it, and I draw everything out as much as possible. And I think it's really interesting what happens when you start doing doing that because the mind brings everything even clearer and clearer. So we could go on and on about that, but the answer just quickly is yes, I absolutely believe at times there possibly are real experiences going on and they're being covered up as dreams.
One thing Tracy's done, and I know you'll write about this or do a kind of formulation of it more clearly, is you've got 6 levels of
Yeah.
dream vividness from, mundane all the way up to higher levels of this was not a dream. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's
6
interesting.
being out of body, a full out of body
Right.
experience. I don't actually include that in the dream scale. I include it as 6, but it's outside of dreams. So it's just an interesting way for us to look at our dreams and to track these things.
I saw one question I would like to
Go
deal
for
with.
it.
I just saw it passing up.
Wait,
and,
before you say, I just want to say, I know some people in there are saying that we can't get to all the questions and why not them. I just want to say there is such a volume of questions. It's really hard for us to catch them all. And sometimes we'll put them down for and we'll get around to them. And please join us again. And we're not ignoring anybody's question. I just want
you
you
have
to
to
know
say,
that.
like when we're looking at the screen, the questions are just flowing up constantly, and it's impossible. But I appreciate it. I saw one though, and I liked it. It was just, I'm paraphrasing because it was way up the list there, about is there an intentional holding back of our technology? CPU speed's been stuck at a certain level for a while, and much more. So I have breakthroughs been going on in the classified world, and I'm always assuming the answer to that is yes. I've talked a number of times about a conversation I had with a scientist a number of years ago who told me in 1965 that the NSA had computers running at clock speeds of about 650 megahertz. Today that's like not impressive. Your phone is better. But in 1965, that was pretty swift indeed, right? And in fact, it was so fast that the computer market, the consumer market, didn't catch up to that clock speed for 35 years until around the year 2000. So you could really say that in the mid 60s, this agency that no one knew about, the NSA, had the fastest computers in the world by a long margin and were many decades ahead. So I think this is a fair statement to say that this goes on today. Black world technology is, classified for a reason in the field, not simply of computing speed and technology, but in terms of energy. I think energy may be very well the number one area where classified tech has just gone way ahead. And, it's kind of obvious reasons, right? We're in a petrodollar dominated world. Petroleum is where it's at. And anything that replaces petroleum as the fundamental source of energy in this world, that seriously will affect the status of the United States' geopolitical position on the world stage. The United States dominates the world. I'll have to do a mini lecture on this sometime because of what we call the petrodollar. I've talked about this elsewhere. I'm sure lectures on YouTube, but I'll come back to it. Essentially, though, without that system, the U.S. economy and U.S. dominance on the world stage would be significantly weaker.
Thank you. I just want to thank Respergu again. I know you were here last week too. And Strange Powers. I want you to have a look at this.
Thank you. Love your work, Richard. IYO. I don't know what that means. In your opinion, how legit is the Phil Schneider case? Dulce, New Mexico. Is this reason for current whistleblowers to hold back their identity? It's always possible. Let me start with Phil Schneider. So Phil Schneider, a couple of YouTube vids of his are out there. He talked about having done construction work, developing underground tunnels for the black budget government, essentially, and having an encounter with extraterrestrials under the ground, having a shootout with extraterrestrials under the ground, and losing a couple of his fingers, which you can see on the video. He's missing fingers. There are reasons to believe him, reasons not to believe that story. But it is true that Phil Schneider died, and not just died, but I think clearly was murdered. Phil Schneider was murdered. So that opens the question, was he murdered for this reason? And, well, it's absolutely possible. There's a lot of reasons why whistleblowers don't come forward and why they want to retain anonymity. I will just say to you that I deal with such people every year. So there are people who need to retain their anonymity not just because they're afraid of their lives, but they're afraid of losing their jobs. It doesn't have to be life and death. It could be economic. It could be their reputation. So there are absolutely credible reasons why people would want to remain anonymous. I assume that question doesn't deal with the current batch of very known whistleblowers who are really basically celebrities. They're clearly not trying to retain their anonymity. But I definitely think we're in an era, certainly under President Trump, certainly under President Obama, and certainly under President George W. Bush, where whistleblowers are prosecuted to an extreme degree. And that's a frightening thought. It's one thing to want to guard national security, but when national security becomes a cult and really nothing more than a threadbare excuse to conceal criminality, we need to challenge that.
Okay. Now that UFOs are moving into the official consensus world, do you think a Project Bluebeam scenario is more plausible?
Love this question. Okay. So, Bluebeam, fake alien invasion, for just putting it right out there. It's very dumb, kind of a simplified version of it. I've argued for years that I do not believe in a Project Bluebeam scenario. And I've stated very clearly, I believe in false flags. I absolutely believe in those. And I believe that the government has lied about UFOs since forever. So why wouldn't I believe in a Bluebeam? And my logic against a Bluebeam was simply the way that most people constructed it with fake holographic images of flying saucers and this I thought that's logistically too difficult, unwieldy, too much of a logistical nightmare, and not necessary. If you want to implement a one-world fascist totalitarian dictatorship, 24/7 latchkey surveillance society, well, we're getting that. You don't need Bluebeam for that. You don't need a fake alien invasion to scare the shit out of people and make them go running to the state for protection. However, there's other ways of looking at a Bluebeam type of scenario. All right. So one thing that is definitely something we should consider is, well, actually, before I say that, I will just add, I've always said there's not going to be a Bluebeam, but if there's ever an announcement of an alien invasion, that's Bluebeam. There's not going to be a real alien invasion. So don't believe that. Having said that, though, I do think we're very much, we should look at the intelligence community, which, by the way, just as an aside, why do some people now worship the CIA and the FBI as if they're great American patriots when, the same people consider them rightly liars and dangerous to global security and stability? But anyway, that's another question. But we can certainly assume that the CIA and other intelligence agencies that have a stake in this secrecy, that they are always going to be looking to follow the CYA rule and to cover themselves and to protect their motivations. And so they're always going to paint themselves in the most positive light. So that means extraterrestrials, threat, extraterrestrials, bad. Well, maybe some of them are bad. Maybe some of them are a threat. I'm not disputing that, but are all of them a threat? Is the entire scenario this way? I'm doubtful that that's the case. I'm also doubtful that the motivations of the U.S. military-industrial complex, intelligence complex, are benign and good and always for the benefit of we the people. You can believe that if you want. I don't believe that. So I think we can definitely assume that if/when a disclosure moment on this subject becomes inevitable, and there will be a day when this happens, because look, time does not stand still. All right. Yesterday is not today. Today is not tomorrow. And for anyone who thinks that this is going to be stable for the rest of all time, well, that's a delusion. We're in a very great state of change. So when the moment comes, when an admission on this reality has to become more explicit, I think we should expect deception, self-serving admissions, self-serving narratives, and therefore a way probably to ramp up fear as much as deemed safe without causing massive panic, so that people come running to the state for protection. So you can consider that kind of a Bluebeam scenario, maybe.
Awesome. So I just want to let you know that people are tuning in from all over the world. We've got our Aussies. I've got my fellow Canadians. Hi to everybody. We've got South Africa, UK, people tuning in from Scotland, and then in the States, South Carolina, San Francisco, Texas, California, Illinois, Colorado, North Carolina, Arkansas, on and
Wow.
on. I don't even know if we
It's
caught them
amazing.
all, but thanks everyone for tuning in from all over the place. I'll slide it
It's just like
one
an
more
amazing
question.
do it. But like I'm just kind of blown away by just the fact that we can do this, honestly, that we're here with you. It feels like we're here with you. Really, I
Yeah,
can't see them. We can't see them, but
I know.
feels like you're there. I also want to just say, please, if you want to support what I'm doing, what we're doing, hit the like button. It's just right below there. And also subscribe to the channel. By subscribing to the Richard Dolan channel, you're not going to miss a notification, and that really helps us out.
Well, if you do subscribe, the best way to know when all the videos are coming out is to hit notifications, which is right beside the subscribe button. Just click on the bell, and then it'll have a little icon like the bell is ringing, and that will mean you'll get notifications. So that's how you'll know every
Oh,
time a new video comes out, and you'll get a reminder. Sometimes the reminders will come in email. Just want to let you know, however you have it set up. You'll
also,
know you'll get a reminder when the live shows are going to happen, which, by the way, is every Thursday. It's at 7 p.m. now, every Thursday.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that's the
We're
new
moved in.
time.
We should also just mention we have a website called richarddolanmembers.com, and Tracy's done about as much work on that as I've done. We're both on it pretty much every day. I just saw a Courtney Brown question. I don't know if we want to deal with that. But go to Richard Dolan members, and the reason I say this is we've got stuff up there that's free, and there's stuff up there that is for members, and unless you're a member, you can't access it. But there's a lot of information there. I do a lot of blog pieces, posts, interviews, and then there are definite members interviews, which for members only. But it's got our calendar on there, so anything that we're doing,
Everyone can
there's
access that.
there's an events tab there. And if you really do want to support what we're doing, becoming a member is probably the best way to do that as well. So I just want to put that out there, Richard Dolan members, or subscribe on YouTube.
Yeah, we try to make it worth everybody's while, but as Richard said, there is content for everyone, whether you're a member or not. And just want to give a quick shout out to the members, and thanks. We know that some of you are in there, and we really appreciate you showing up and supporting us as you do. And everybody else who's in the chat, everybody, thank you so much for showing your support and writing in your questions. Again, I'm so sorry we can't get to all of them, but they are amazing questions, and you give us lots of ideas for the future. And thank you, everyone, for your amazing super chats. Can't say enough. Just thank you,
Thank you.
for supporting Richard's research. And
Okay. I saw another question I want to deal with, but why don't you ask?
no, if you saw one you want to deal with, go ahead.
Some
I have one in here, but you go
Someone
ahead.
says, Richard, is Trump going to give us disclosure? I'm just going to say no. I don't think so. I mean, even if he wants to. Here's the thing. It was pointed out to me that Trump was encouraged to run for president back in 1999 by guess who? Jesse Ventura. That's interesting. Jesse Ventura, who had the TV show Conspiracy Theory, who's absolutely super brave for when it comes to talking about 9/11. So what that tells me is that, and this is something I suspected all along, is that Trump, as a private citizen, undoubtedly has had an interest in this subject, and that is the fringe, and probably, how would he not really have an interest in UFOs? Who wouldn't? And as a civilian, non-politician, in theory, without any skin in the game, you might think, well, maybe he would just do it. He's got the ego to do it. You could just see that 3 a.m. tweet saying it, but it hasn't happened. And I think it won't happen. And I think primarily because, look, I mean, think about what just happened over the Putin summit. I mean, I said this when I opened the program that, I mean, he's been hammered by the media, just God forbid, for meeting with Putin. And it forced him to recant something that he has openly stated for 2 years, which is that there was no Russian tampering in the election. He stated over and over again. And suddenly, just the last day, after being beaten by the Republicans and Democrats, he essentially did what seems to be a kind of a wimpy about face on this. I mean, cringeworthy, where he says, "Well, maybe our intelligence community is correct." This is a paraphrase, but and so maybe Russia did tamper with our elections. I'm like, everyone knows it did not happen, and Trump, most of all, knows it didn't happen. So if he can be beaten down on that issue, what's the likelihood that he's really going to step up and really take the right swing at the plate on UFO disclosure? I think it's not going to happen. I think he doesn't have the leeway. He doesn't have any foreign policy flexibility, it seems to me, anymore. He's completely boxed in by neocons. And so I've given up. I don't really think that there's any likelihood that he's going to be the disclosure president. I don't think any president is willingly going to do this until we have a major changing of the guards in terms of the power structure inside Washington. And it's not happening in the Democratic Party, and I don't see it happening in the Republican Party. So my answer.
Okay.
No, he's not going to do it.
Gosh, there's so many good questions out there. I'm seeing people asking questions about Putin and your thoughts about the election, but that we don't have time to get into.
Well, I've gone over it, so go back to the earlier part of this when it's out there. And I mean, so I've talked, and I've written about this. I've talked about it. I'll come back to it again, guaranteed. The country's gone out of its mind over Russia, and it's, there'll be a day in the future when we look back and think, what the hell were we drinking? What was in the water that made America lose its mind over Russia? And there'll be a lot of reasons given, but it's happening. It's scary to see, actually, but it hopefully it will pass. We're just going. We just keep going.
Yeah, I know. Do you want one more?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you explain all of the crashes that happen when aliens or others are supposed to have such advanced technology?
Yeah, it's a fair question.
It is.
Couple of things. Well, I can't explain everything. What I do know is that there are more than a handful of good, well-researched cases where it sure as hell appears that what we call UFOs came down and were recovered by the U.S. military, that they crashed. Now, does that mean they were all made by aliens, or does that mean that we made them or someone else made them and we recovered them? And I don't know. Roswell, I think the case on Roswell is very strong. Aztec, New Mexico, 1948, ditto, I think is a strong case. Las Vegas in 1962, not very well known, but I'd say a very good case that an anomalous UFO came down and was recovered. And there's others. There's one in Bolivia in 1978, and another one in South America in 1997. That's a little more less to go on in that case, but they happen. So why? And then Russia, Dalmagorsk in 1986 in the Soviet Union, and there's others. So why would logically superior aliens, presumably, that may be eons ahead of us for all we know, come down? I don't know. But one thing I can say is that Earth-based weapons are not trivial anymore. And, it's really a matter of physics. Unless we assume that alien physics is truly like magic, then we could certainly anticipate that electromagnetic bullets of some sort or other types of depleted uranium-tipped missiles might in fact be able to take down an alien craft. When you really think about it, do they have a force field for everything? Even despite their advanced technology, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't. And maybe their entry into Earth's atmosphere caused disturbance that was somehow unexpected initially. It seems improbable, I will agree with you. But I don't know all the answers to this, and all we're doing here is speculating.
It's time.
It is time.
Sorry.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming out. It's been these chats go fast, don't they?
They go so fast, and I know I keep saying it, but it's so true. There's so many goodies in here There's so many great comments. Thank you for all the comments. So many great questions.
We have to save some of these, but then the
I
problem
know.
is more will come in next time.
No, and we're trying to round it out. So trying to, because Richard's into so many things, trying to cover some of the geopolitics, current events, what's going on in that realm, trying to cover UFOs, that realm, and anything else that comes up, like the remote viewing and dreams. We try to touch into that as well. So the very creative questions. Thank you. We will look. We'll look into the chat more when we're done here.
All we're doing, and all I'm ever trying to do, is we do our best. So we're having what I consider to be interesting conversations, and trying to switch my brain on as much as possible and Tracy's brain on as much as possible, so we can be sort of engaged for you. And I suspect that you're coming to the table with the same attitude. We're all coming here basically trying to have a conversation. That's all it's about. If I have hardcore actionable intelligence that we can work on, great. But meanwhile, we're dealing with some very interesting mysteries, very interesting questions. And I think the best thing that we can do is ask those questions, engage the world, and hopefully open some eyes and ears for those around us. Really, the best thing that we all can do is be brave, go out there and speak up and engage other people in a positive way, one that engages them and allows them to open up to what you've got to say. So that's what it's about. Hope you enjoyed.
Wonderful. Good night, everyone. We'll see you next week or at our member site. Take care.
Thank you. Now
Thank you.
I'm gonna reach ahead and turn this off. This is my iPhone is doing this. So here we go.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
so much.
Bye now.
Thank you.